getting to your next. Sometimes on our I'll go ahead and call to order the Tuesday, December 6th regular meeting of the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors. First up, we'll go to the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next, we'll go to, actually, before we go to our township manager, we did have an executive session today on a matter of
personnel.
Thank you. And with that, let's go to our township manager to let us know how we can all participate in this virtual and physical hybrid format meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to members of the board, staff, and the public for joining us this evening for the December 6th regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors. This meeting has been properly advertised in accordance with Pennsylvania Sunshine Act as a hybrid meeting with the option to attend online using Zoom platform, and the main meeting room is available for members of the public to attend in person. If you are joining the Zoom meeting and wish to speak on behalf of an agenda item, please say your name, municipality of residence, and the topic you wish to speak on when the chairwoman calls on you. Prior to commencing the meeting, I have just a few short procedural items to cover. First, members of the public attending using Zoom platform are asked to remain muted during the meeting to prevent any ambient noise from disrupting the meeting. If a member of the public is acknowledged by the chair, they may unmute their microphone for their question or comment. Secondly, board members are asked to indicate their name when motioning or seconding a motion so that the minutes may accurately reflect the action taken. Finally, a roll call of the Board of Supervisors will now be taken to ensure that all members can hear and interact using the Zoom meeting platform. Please indicate that you are here when your name is called. Ms. Deneny?
Here.
Mr. Gracie Griffin?
Here.
Mr. Thompson?
I'm here.
Ms. Stevens?
Here.
Ms. Strickland?
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you so much. Next up, we'll go to citizens input. This would be for items that are not currently on the agenda. If anyone would care to speak during this time, if you could limit yourself to about 5 minutes. And please state your name and your municipality of residence. Would anyone care to address the board on matters not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. This evening, we are considering approval of the November 9th, the November 10th budget meeting minutes, and the November 15th regular meeting minutes.
This is Patty. I move that the board approve the minutes as listed in the agenda.
This is Lisa. I'll second.
Thank you. Any questions or corrections? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Let's move on to our authorities, boards, and commissions reports. We have with us John Spahalski of the Center Area Transportation Authority, or CATA. Welcome, John, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much. It's always good to be with you.
You have, of course, a written synopsis of the events that took place at several board meetings and a work session. The 26th of September, regular board meeting, the 28th September board work session, the 24 October regular meeting of the board, the 21 November 2022 regular meeting. And as to highlights, I think November 21st sector has some important things that perhaps merit some vocal attention here this evening. The third bullet, the board approved the purchase of 34 driver protection systems to be installed on CATA buses, utilizing a PennDOT grant funding allotment that was allocated for this purpose, and also some local capital match funds that our local municipalities have provided. This will provide greater security for the operators of CATA bus operators. At the same time, it will enable quick egress in the case of an emergency that the bus operator has to exit his or her work position. But safety is a concern for our employees, and this is a way of providing some tangible and workable protection. The grant only covers 34 protection system installations for 34 of the buses, so additional PennDOT grant funding has been requested to equip the remainder of the CATA bus fleet with the same protection systems. And also, another safety-related matter, the board adopted the annual public transportation safety plan update and authorize staff to transmit performance data against the safety performance targets to PennDOT and the Center County Metropolitan Planning Organization. Also at that meeting, but in a different way, it has some strategic and tactical aspects to it. The board approved a new, approved a motion to have the executive director execute a contract with a firm named Method 3 for an information technology staffing structure review and a future enterprise asset project and search services. Elaborating on this a little bit, it is a critical thrust to upgrade and improve CATA's strength in the information technology area from the standpoint of both the senior level administrative part of that function and the appropriate allocation of different types of hands-on technical work to the staff reporting to whomever would lead that group. And as we all know, information technology is critical. It's self-evident, perhaps by this time of point in history. But CATA needed some additional advice on this and help with it. And with that, I think it will also enable CATA to fill a critical managerial position, as well as some of the positions below it that are hands-on technical in nature. I know that there's a time limit, supposedly of 3 minutes assigned, if I remember the request to my appearances with you, but I'm willing to and happy to stand open for any questions that you might have about any of the entries in the written report.
Thank you so much, John. Really fantastic news about the ability to provide those safety enhancements for the drivers. So thank you for always prioritizing that, or the operators. Any questions for John? Yes, Lisa.
Just a couple. Hi, John. Thank you for the great report. I just wanted to bring up something that we had talked about at our last budget meeting, and that's the the bus stop on Blue Course Drive at just before Martin Street, where the residents are crossing mid-block from I want to call it State College Park Apartments, but I don't think that's the name of it anymore. But it's between Circleville and Martin Street, that block where the riders cross mid-block. There's lighted crosswalks on both ends of that block, but they cross mid-block to get to that bus stop. And so we've been asking and just want to encourage continued exploration of how to solve that problem of the riders crossing mid-block. I don't know if it could be education of the riders about that safety risk that they're posing to obviously themselves, but everyone in that region when they're crossing that way. So just wanted to mention that to you. There's a plan here at the township to build an island there with some pedestrian assist mechanisms. I'm not sure, that will still be a ways away. So even if that comes comes out next year, but there needs to be some type of mitigation, I think, in the meantime. So wanted to bring that up to you. Maybe.
There's perhaps a model for that on in the borough with a crosswalk that unfortunately had experienced some accidents. I believe one was fatal, and that has been remedied with an island. It was not an easy thing to fit in that thoroughfare. I'm talking about East Park Avenue near McKee Street.
Oh, okay.
And so I am very familiar with the location that you're mentioning. It's passengers using the W route and the WC route. And I've observed more than a few instances of the number of people who board there and deboard, and the number of people who cross the Blue Course thoroughfare. And I certainly am on board with a need to do something there that I think is urgent. If we can somehow find the wherewithal to do it. There should also be, in addition to the protection at the crossing of that roadway by pedestrians, there should also be some consideration to the amenities on the what I sometimes call the east side of the street. There is no shelter there. And you see in some cases a large number of people standing in the rain or in a snowstorm. And sometimes in the wintertime, it gets even harder. That's another subject for another day, perhaps. But one of the issues that I would like to see addressed is somehow managing our snow removal process so that we don't just plow snow off the roadway into a bus shelter or onto a bus waiting platform. And as a person who uses transit service and is accustomed to some of those difficulties, that's why I own a pair of high top boots. But that's not always a solution. And so thank you for bringing that up. I hope between CATA and the township that and some of the other perhaps parties or stakeholders involved, something can be done to improve access to transit, both from a safety standpoint and from the standpoint of amenity or quality of service above and beyond safety. Safety is prime, but the other aspects or other dimensions of what you might call overarching service quality for transit users has many parts or several parts, and they all need to be addressed.
Thanks so much. And I'll mention one other thing that I was going to bring up later in my CCMPO reports, but since you're here now, that CATA Reimagine study, we got a presentation on that at the last CCMPO meeting, and it sounds really detailed, really involved, and I think there was a lot of stakeholder feedback involved in that, and I think, is it right your board's going to probably adopt that this month, or maybe already did, and it should be distributed maybe early next year?
So that
Is
question.
Luana with us tonight?
I see her.
Oh, yes,
up
here you
on the
are.
screen.
There's Luana. I see her there. Name on the bottom of the screen here.
Yes, thank you. Welcome, Luana.
Hello. So that study will be going to the board in December for an acceptance. And so then what happens from there? Those are sort of the best practices that are being brought forward by the consultant. And then the work begins with the board to determine what of those consultant ideas that they believe we should move forward with. So the next work will be with the board looking at what they're going to actually enact and what kind of a timeline we think we might be able to do that.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, again, for your service and for being here and for this exchange of information. Very much appreciated. We'll look forward to that report, and thank you, Ms. Strickland, for kind of connecting some dots there for us. Yep. So let's go ahead and we will move on to, sorry, just lost my place in the agenda. We will move on to our special reports and acknowledgements. First up, we wanted to acknowledge some items under diversity, equity, and inclusion. That would be Christmas Day this month, also New Year's Eve upcoming, Kwanzaa and Hanukkah. We have no township and fiscal responsibility reports, so we'll move on to environment, which we frequently find items that are of interest to our parks or related to our parks here. And indeed, tonight we find that Mr. Gordon Kaufman is with us to give us a skate park presentation. And if I'm not mistaken, this would be, and we'll hear more, for identified as going into High Point Park in the borough. Mr. Kaufman.
This has been rescheduled. This should have been removed from your agenda.
Okay, you saw me trying to read the fine print on the screen. I apologize, this has been rescheduled, so we will not have that presentation this evening, and we'll move on to the COG and Regional Committee reports. First up, we have the Finance Committee. I attended that meeting. There's really nothing to point out there of interest that hasn't already transpired. If there's any questions about the agenda. Okay. Center Region Park and Recreation Authority. You would find the agenda for the 11/17/22 CRPR hybrid meeting. That's, I guess we could have any questions on that. This is not a typical evening where we have our authority representative that's reporting. They did cover the Millbrook Marsh Boardwalk, so if you're interested in that, you can take a look at that agenda for more information. And, you know, we'll talk about Whitehall Road a little bit later. So that was really the only other item. So next up, we could move to the Executive Committee. So again, items have already transpired. Executive Committee leading into the COG General Forum meeting. Any questions on the agenda for Executive? Okay. Center County Metropolitan Planning Organization, that would be Ms. Strickland.
Yeah, just a couple of things. We met, and the agenda covers everything in great detail. I'll just point out, besides the Reimagine study, that might have been, and then there was a presentation on the State College Area Connector. And then I did want to note that on Monday, the CCMBO had a meeting for strategic planning. And this was a 4-hour meeting, Monday morning, where we gathered, and I want to say maybe 40 members. I'm not sure, that's a guess. And Mr. Kevin Abbey was there as well, so I might be over or underestimating. He can correct me if I'm wrong. But it was just such a productive meeting, and it was termed a retreat, and there was breakfast provided. It was just so well organized. We started on time, we ended on time. We got through the entire agenda, and they had us broken down very strategically into groups to work together. There were different representatives of CCMPO present, and just the very smallest background on the Center County MPO, our Metropolitan Planning Organization, it's countywide. We have both a coordinating committee and a technical committee of that organization, and a lot of I'll just say the technical committee obviously is made up of engineers, roadmasters, people with the technical expertise needed, and then the coordinating committee is a lot of elected and appointed officials who are doing policy stuff, but really there's a lot of overlap there, and that's a lot of what we talked about, how one person said he attended the tech committee meeting, and then the next day the coordinating committee meeting, it was the same meeting. So, and we had all seen that a lot in different agendas. So there was a lot of discussion about that, a lot of discussion about how we can better communicate with PennDOT, as that's, the best forum to do that. How we can, I guess, engage our experts who were there on the technical committee better, and then also kind of operational things. So it was very involved. I've got the agenda planning packet here if anybody wants to look at it, and that process continues of updating that or creating that strategic plan. So it was very, very good. So
Thank you so much.
appreciated being able to attend.
Any questions for Lisa? That sounds like a great effort that was made there.
It was great, and it was really impressive who all was there, who
Great.
gave the time to attend that.
At that table. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Mhm.
Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the Facilities Committee. Now, a lot was going on with me looking at documents, but I didn't see the Facilities Committee agenda in here. Is it? Okay.
No, because the last one we had was the joint meeting.
Right.
Otherwise, has been canceled.
Right, so that joint meeting was November 15th.
I think we discussed that at our last meeting.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so that was discussed then, all right. And then that's when we saw the motion move forward with Whitehall that we'll also be discussing later. Okay, great. And then we've got Spring Creek Watershed Commission report here. I did see Mr. Garlicki present. There he is. Hello, Mr. Garlicki.
And Mr. Abbey is there as well.
And hello, Mr. Abbey. Thank you both for being here. Mr. Garlicki, is there anything that you would like to point out in your report?
Yeah, just a few things. And I know time might be limited, so I'll try to go quick. But there's a few things of importance that I think the supervisors have to consider. The first one is on the report that we put together. So moving forward, representation on the Spring Creek Watershed Commission board has to be an elected member. So that would be a supervisor on the board. And then there has to be an alternate. And the significance behind this, so right now, I'm not an elected member, and neither is Kevin Abbey. So again, the significance is that the supervisor has to be on the commission board. And the reason behind that is because money is being transferred from the municipalities to the commission. So there really should be that, or needs to be, according to the bylaws and the articles of incorporation, the way it was originally set up, that there has to be that municipal official on the board moving forward. So I think that's significant for the supervisors to kind of digest.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that, making that connection for us. I got Yes, I had gotten the memo, but I had not drawn the connection between the dots. Appreciate that. Thank you. Yes, please do continue.
Yes, thank you. And then there was a proposed new bylaws, which I'll get into. So going over the meeting, there was an educational topic where Ms. Brindley talked about collaboration, and that's exactly what the commission does. They try to collaborate between the municipalities and bring the watershed together for the benefit of the watershed. One water plan, then that's the phase 3 of the one water plan, where it's the next phase, where how do the commission, how do the municipalities kind of protect the watershed? So that's where they're going to be moving forward with establishing an executive committee, members from the community to brainstorm how to address the watersheds and its needs. At the October meeting, it was Chair Danini mentioned, hey, is there an agricultural representative on this phase 3 committee? And I did ask that. And the executive committee and the phase 3 working group has reached out to the agricultural community. I don't know if anyone has joined yet from the agricultural community, but I think that is going to be a focus in the future. And Kevin's on the line here. I think he can see to that the agricultural community is represented on this phase 3 committee.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for suggesting. And then on the bylaws, there is a bylaw change. This was worked up by several members of the phase 3 working group. And it's suggested bylaws to have a continuity of leadership within the commission itself. So it's recognized that supervisors may come off the commission or go on the commission, and there kind of needs to be a core group that kind of leads the commission through the years. And the thought process is that that's going to be better for the watershed itself. So in the packet, I have the bylaws that were submitted. There were 2 major changes that were suggested, and those are in the report. But basically, it would say that the chairperson and the vice chairperson of the commission doesn't necessarily need to be an elected official. And that there's going to be an executive committee that's set up within the commission that kind of is that continuity or sustainability within the commission to guide the commission through the years. So those are somewhat significant changes from what was in the past, but it's for the Supervisors Commission. This letter and these bylaws went out to all the municipalities for consideration. And eventually it's requested that you review them, comment on them, and approve them or decide what you want to do with them moving forward. But again, the commission is dedicated to the watershed. And so that's the main goal. So it's a lot to consider. I know in a 5-10 minute sort of briefing here. So there's a lot packed in there, whereas a supervisor needs to be represented, and then there needs to be an alternate, and then this bylaw change. But again, because there's money transferred from municipalities to the commission, this is an important deal. And so, people need to kind of watch over the commission, watch what they're doing, but also then be able to guide and sustain the commission in its mission to protect the watershed. That's a lot. are there any questions? I left you, in the report and all the attachments, I have it all there. So are there any questions on this?
Any questions?
Yeah.
I think I'm going to maybe have some. It is a little bit to digest. I'm not quite sure if I understand yet how the proposed changes to the bylaws and the information about the articles of incorporation interact together yet, but I just am kind of putting it all together right now. So I appreciate you pointing it out to us. And what is the timeline, I guess, we would have to, if I understand correctly, we as member municipalities, we would need to approve the bylaws. Or maybe there's some process that we will, whether it's officially approval or maybe a recommendation to approve or something of that sort, I wouldn't be sure about that. But what would be the timeline, I guess, for the change? If that's known.
Well, maybe Kevin can speak on this as well, but one of the sort of conditions is that the existing chair, Paul Takic, is an elected official, but of course he is changing his position so he's leaving the commission, and then the vice chair, who is also an elected official, is leaving the commission due to other reasons. And so it kind of leaves the commission in a quandary in a way that it's kind of left kind of in the open. So that's why there's been this push to maintain a continuity of the commission, and that necessarily the chairman and the vice chair doesn't have to be an elected official.
Sure, gotcha, thanks, yep. Gotcha.
So, I mean, it's hoped that the bylaws can be reviewed by all the municipalities and then, approved or commented on, and then that information would be taken back to the commission for eventual everyone approving.
Yep.
That's the hope.
If you
So
have
Kevin,
yep.
I see you're on the line as well. Do you have anything to add there?
Thank you, Mark. That's really very thorough. The Watershed Commission meets every 2 months. So its meeting in November brought forward the information that Mark has shared with you. In January, the third Wednesday would be its organizational meeting, where it will receive responses, comments from the 12 member municipalities. This is the first consideration of bylaw changes since the commission was created 15 years ago in 2007. And as Mark pointed out, it hit us that our current executive committee is 3, and with Paul leaving College Township Council at the end of November and being a representative-elect to the State House, and Joanne Tosti-Vasey stepping off as Bellefonte's representative, we were compelled to reorganize so that, as Mark said, we had more sustainability and we're not so potentially limited with only 3 executive committee members. But the hope is that we get feedback and can look to act on the bylaw changes in January. If we need to take more time and move that to March, we can do that. There's no urgent situation. We will, in January, do our organizational meeting. We will make sure to have a township supervisor as both chair and vice chair to get the meeting going. And then we'll see if from feedback from both the municipalities, the elected officials, and the members that are appointed, if we're ready to move forward on bylaw changes in January. If not, that could be moved to March.
Thank you so much. So it sounds like first meeting in January, we'll be talking about this then. Okay, appreciate you bringing that to us.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes, and do keep in mind that it should be decided who the elected township official is from Ferguson Township that's represented on the commission. I know the supervisors have a lot on their plate already. That is how commission bylaws and articles of corporation are set up, that their supervisor be in attendance there. So
Thanks, Mark. I think what you're
it has to be.
I think what you're helping me kind of see there is that I'm kind of blending these up a wee bit, but the change in the bylaws is separate from the understanding of the articles of incorporation requiring an elected official. So we'll have that appointment on our January roster of appointments as well. So,
Yes, thank you.
yep, sure, thank you. Okay, any other thoughts or questions? Okay, all right, let's go ahead and, next, just to review, we have a cancellation notice from both the Land Use and Community Infrastructure Committee and the Park and Recreation Governance Committee. We have no other committee reports, and we'll move on to staff reports. Ms. Martin, is there anything that you wanted to, okay, nothing to point out. Any questions for our township manager? All right, seeing none, any questions or anything that staff would want to point out about any of their reporting areas for Public Works, Planning and Zoning? Looks like Public Works is here. Nothing to point out, nothing to ask. All right, we'll move on. Unfinished business is up next. And we have a public hearing on the proposed 2023 Ferguson Township Annual Operating Budget. This will be introduced by Ms. Martin, Township Manager, and Eric Anderson, Director of Finance. Ms. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the Board of Supervisors received a draft 2022 annual operating budget on November 3rd and conducted 2 public special meetings to review the document. Those 2 special meetings were held on November 9th and November 10th. Amendments to the budget were approved by consensus for each vote at the end of the November 10th special meeting. Those amendments have been incorporated into the document that has been advertised for public hearing this evening. A copy of the proposed 2023 operating budget is made available at the Township Building for inspection and accessible through the Township's website. The public input on the document should be received this evening so that any resulting changes that would be considered by the Board of Supervisors and approved would be incorporated prior to its final adoption at the regular meeting on December 13th. Below in the agenda, below the narrative, is a link to the proposed 2023 annual operating budget. With that, I'll conclude my introduction to this item. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And this is a public hearing. At this time, we would receive any comments from the public. Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and move on to entertaining a motion at this time.
This is Patty. I move that we approve the motion that is listed in the agenda.
Thank you very much.
This is Lisa, I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Yes, Lisa?
Just 2 quick items. I did get an email asking about the stormwater fee for Two Deck Park and if the township could submit an exemption form on their behalf if they're a 501c3.
So the Tudic Park Trust would, the Board of Trustees would come together, and if they wanted to make that motion collectively, they could do that.
Okay, so they need to do it on their own behalf.
Right,
Okay.
and that's not to say that staff couldn't do that. Staff is not doing that for the other parks, so that's something that involves a little bit more of a conversation.
Okay, Thank you for answering that. And then I did just want to note, I thought the format of all the discussions just was so well done, and I appreciated all the effort in that. And there were some minor educational components in that, just a way for the board to kind of look ahead and evaluate and assess. And I appreciated you putting all that information in the first day. It really contextualized a lot of the documents that we had in a way that we're able to look forward. And I appreciated all of that. So thank you.
Thank you for recalling that. I'll second that. That was very helpful to provide that kind of, I don't know what I'll call it, maybe a decision-making rubric, sort of, on our approach to the budget with the 5 strategies that we could use. That was very helpful as a decision-making framework, so thank you very much. Any other comments or questions or thoughts? Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second. This will be a roll call vote. If
yes,
not, we're going to do it as one now.
I apologize, Madam Chair. Yes, so this is a roll call for Resolution 2022-28. Mr. Gracie Griffin.
Aye.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevens.
Yes, but I'm sort of confused here. So are we authorizing a public hearing of the final budget?
No, well,
Let me pull this up here.
Tonight is the public hearing.
yes.
Okay,
Tonight
right.
is the
So
public
yes, I'm
hearing.
sorry, yes.
Yeah. If I think it might be the case that sometimes the motion might be offered before the opening of the public hearing. I'm not sure. But regardless, right now, we are, Ms. Martin.
Thank you. So this evening, the board is asked to approve the budget, so you're not adopting the budget. I apologize for the confusion. So approve with the amendments that have been made following the special meeting, and also authorize for the public hearing to be held on December 13th at your meeting. So the board will take official formal action to adopt the budget December 13th. This evening, you're approving the budget as it's been presented, understanding that when it comes to the board December 13th, there will be no more changes. So what you approve tonight is what will be carried over for the final adoption of the budget. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you.
So then just to connect the dots, the public hearing happens tonight in order to take that input for opportunity for change.
Yes. Thank you.
So there was no
So it's
op-
actually, forgive me, Madam Chair, it's not a roll call vote. I was
Right.
thinking, I was like, oh, it's a roll
Yes.
call. But now, yeah, it's not a roll call. You're asked to approve the way it's presented because this is how it'll be formally carried over for December 13th for formal action, which will require the resolution. Thank you. Supervisor.
However, we can do a roll call if we want to.
That is true. You absolutely
Okay.
can.
Yes.
But it's
I'm
not
a yes.
mandated by the resolution.
Okay, right.
Thank you for, yes.
Okay.
Did we make it through the roll call?
We
Because
did
we
not.
stopped at Patty.
Right,
Do you want to
sorry.
finish it up?
Yes, Ms. Strickland, or Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Thank you. And Ms. Strickland.
Yes.
And
Okay.
Ms. Denetti, if I have.
Ms. Denetti, yes, thank you.
Yes.
Well,
Yes,
thank you,
yes,
thank
and
you.
yes. Motion passes unanimously. And just a question about the heat. Thank you.
Warm.
It's a bit warm.
It's
Thank
warm.
you.
We struggle to find the balance
Thank you.
in the room temperature.
Thank you. So I just.
Thank you, James.
Right. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the review of the Center Region COG Solar Power Purchasing Agreement presentation. This will also be introduced by Ms. Martin, Township Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this item is in the agenda for the board to just take some intentional time, think about that presentation the board would have received as part of the general forum on November 28th. I believe it was Ms. Pam Adams who did a presentation, an update on the solar power purchasing agreement project. So the SPPA project management team, it's my understanding that they will be meeting tomorrow, and they are looking to gather the questions and comments as they pursue taking information, including the questions and comments, to the SPPA working group. The Board of Supervisors this evening is really just being asked to give some thought to that presentation received at the General Forum on November 28th and share with me any questions that you may have or comments that I could forward to SPPA, working project management team.
Thank you so much. All right, so on the agenda tonight is for us to generate any questions that we have about the solar power purchasing agreement. Multiple partners involved with this, many, I would say, and we are one of them. We will eventually need to consider what our final commitment is, as I believe as the contract is issued. I believe is when that final commitment is needed. But for now, any questions as we move into that final moment? So a question would be about the project itself. What we kind of learned last time was that prior to the most recent presentation, there was basically kind of two different options that were being explored. One would be invest in an existing facility, and then one would be building. It looks like we're moving more into building. And so any questions that we would want the project management team to be able to answer for us as we move into potential construction. And my question at the General Forum was about risk. Just who is absorbing the risk for the construction project? And that was addressed, but I wouldn't mind sending it along as a formal question to the project management team to get a written response. Yeah. Any other questions?
Just a couple.
Yeah, please do.
So, and they really revolved around the length of the contract we'd be entering into, because I think it was 15 years. And so that's where my questions were. So terms of the contract, if, prices were to fall substantially, is there some threshold where the contract could be renegotiated at a certain percentage or after a certain period of time? Just to give us a little more confidence in locking something like that in. Termination clauses, because we're moving forward with the building option. If what do those look like if the power isn't adequate, if the supply isn't adequate, if the build isn't acceptable? What are our options there independently and then as a group? So I'm not clear on where the township lies in relation to the group with regard to the contracts and terms.
Yes.
And then the last question I just thought of when you mentioned the risk, I had thought of this when you said that, was how many other partners are involved with these particular corporations at this building, or at this stage with them just building? So is it just our group? Are there many other groups? Are we really funding the building of this thing? And then what else do we get from that, I guess, if we're the ones who are kind of the backbone of financing that? So
Basically other investors?
Yeah, what are other investors, and who or how many other groups are involved in signing contracts with the different companies we're looking at?
Great.
I would think they could give us some indication of,
ballparking,
it's just you,
or right.
we've got everybody. So I'd think they'd have some indication of their
And then with my
investment
question,
prospects.
kind of then we're assessing. Yeah. Okay, great. Jeremy, just want to make sure to, okay, I got that. Yeah, all righty. Sounds like that's about it, Ms. Martin.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. And next up, we have the review of the progress of the strategic plan. And this will be introduced by Ms. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I really want to emphasize this is a short item on behalf of staff. It's to follow up and give the board a general overview of what has been completed since some of the subcommittee meetings that were held over the last few months. You may recall as a board that there was some conversation.
One moment, I'm sorry, I'm getting a signal that there's an audio issue. I apologize for interrupting. Is there an audio issue anywhere?
Ms. Martin is talking to you.
Okay.
We can't hear
Okay,
you.
gotcha. Thank you for.
Thank you.
for
Can you hear
signaling.
me?
Thank
Can
you
you
for
hear me?
signaling.
Is this better?
So far.
Maybe the
Okay,
microphone.
great.
I don't know if it's the microphone.
Yeah, I
is-
just changed
Yeah,
the microphone.
thank you,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
So the board had several conversations this year following the consultant that was initially engaged, the Pilati firm, Mr. Peter Milan, facilitated some of the initial steps in the strategic plan update. And then following his participation and facilitation of this project, staff took the lead to coordinate and hold several subcommittee meetings, at which point board members came and discussed, reviewed parts of the strategic plan that was the initial effort from the Pilati firm, as well as a combination of requested feedback requested by the Board of Supervisors to get staff's feedback for updates into the strategic plan, as well as feedback from the community to integrate into the strategic plan. And as directed, staff added all of the feedback, which were individual goals, objectives, and action steps. And it was an exercise that really involved just compiling all of the data together, which extended to, I think, a 50-plus page document, as you know. Then the board had these several committee meetings and decided to kind of provide some feedback, comments, questions. We cleaned up the language along the way. And what is provided to the Board of Supervisors this evening is a document that's only reflecting the chapter with the goals. We extracted that area, given that its level of importance, and really kind of hones in on serving as a guidance or a tool for staff as we progress in our individual departmental work plans. What you'll find are that staff, and I'll note that actually Assistant Township Manager James Progar has really taken a lead in the last couple of months on this. He's integrated in the comments that we've received from supervisors as part of those subcommittee meetings. So you should find on the side of the document the comments that are listed to complement the actual change made to the goal and the objective in the track changes. What has been removed in terms of the document that's presented to you this evening are the action steps. There were several action steps within each of the objectives underneath the goals. And as I began to review them to determine, what, as your manager, I recommend, while the action steps were certainly well written and useful, I really give a lot of thought and consideration to what might be an effective action step in our current environment, in our current time, may very well not be an action step that would be appropriate or in the best interest of the township 2 years from now. So what's in front of you now is just to provide you kind of with a progress update that we are moving this forward, that we are reviewing the very specific areas of interest, which I'll refer to as the goal and the objective, which is brought back to you to review everyone's comment. I'm still reviewing for to finalize, to bring back to you a pre-final document. Tonight, the board is asked only to receive this document as it's still a work in progress, but as you can see, there's been a great deal of work done to advance it forward. I do believe we're near the end. And I also want to propose for your consideration in a future discussion, or if the board, of course, wants to share feedback now, I'll take that. But that when we bring this pre-final version back to the Board of Supervisors, that we are bringing back to the board only the goals and the action steps for adoption, and that we have an extended version of the strategic plan update that would have the action steps that I would consider recommended as more of a longer version of your strategic plan. A long version with those action steps serving as guidance, but not necessarily adopted as a required action step for the township to follow. And so with that, that is the update for you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Well, first, I would just want to say thank you so much to our township staff who have really just put so much work into this, and in particular, James. Really thank you for integrating that volume of information. And really that's a testimony to, you know, our effort here to really receive public input and integrate that into the strategic direction of the township. And we are all aligned, staff and board, on that mission. And so, you know, was just really evident throughout this process. So I just want to say that. Any thoughts? I mean, so really, I think that what the focus here is to receive this document and to perhaps make a few comments on the process that the manager has laid out for us. So the only comment I have on content is I really appreciate, I think what we did is we kind of leveled up on our organizational structure of the document. So for example, if you look at I think it's the environmental goal, and then having the subsets of climate change and parks and those kind of topical areas. So, you know, just to reflect on how that occurred is that as we were receiving all that input, we were finding that, you know, it would be helpful to kind of categorize things under subheadings, particularly in the more complicated goal areas. And so I just say that, you know, thank you for really leading us in that direction and helping us with that as we move forward with this. So any other, I would say, very high level comments on that kind of thing? Okay, seeing none. And then on the process, so just to reflect, the goal here would be to, at a future time, in the near future, bring back the document to receive some reflections on the content of the goals and the objectives that are being presented here. I guess my only thought then is related to the action steps. So I guess what my recommendation would be is that we consider not including the action steps in the strategic plan document itself for approval within the goals and objectives, but as an appendix, but still in that original document that we approve. And the reason I would say as an appendix in that document is because sometimes if you don't, in the future, then have the two things connected, they can get separated through time. So I guess my only reflection would be let's consider that at our next step when it comes back, how we want to include those either as appendix or as a separate document, or how that might occur. Any other comments on the process?
I agree with the idea of giving it the latitude so that there's flexibility on those really precise items that were outlined.
Yeah.
So, and however that's done, I think we can come up with a good solution for that.
Yeah. Those action items were so precise that they may become outdated faster than our strategic plan. So that's why we wanted to not put them right in that main goal achieving area. So thank you. Okay.
Can I ask one
Yes,
question?
please.
How often do we renew our strategic plan?
Yeah, that's a great question. So generally the goal is about 5 years. So the last time that this was updated was in 2017. And I would even go as far as to say, depending on the just the current climate in comparison to what the existing at any given time strategic plan is, 3 years is also acceptable. So
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, it looks like we will move on, but before moving on to the review, sorry, lost my page. Review of the Whitehall Road Regional Park update. I'm going to ask for a brief recess, 5 minutes. All right, so 5-minute recess and we'll be right back. Thank you. welcome back. Just confirming that Mr. Thompson can hear and participate in the meeting, our virtual member this evening. Wonderful, thank you, Mr. Thompson. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the review of Whitehall Road Regional Park update. So we'll just move to the narrative. So the reason that this is on our agenda tonight is that, we have an upcoming decision that'll be made. In fact, the first paragraph in the narrative talks about the effort of the COG to schedule a special general forum meeting for a date to be determined in December. That date has been determined. It's tomorrow. That meeting has been scheduled for tomorrow at noon. It is a primarily virtual meeting, but individuals can attend at the COG general forum meeting as well. And the budgeted time period on the Zoom is, I do believe, 1 hour. So due to the nature of the agenda item there at the COG, which I do have a moment, I have not yet seen the agenda for this meeting. I'm not sure if others have. I mean,
it was sent out, but I
okay.
didn't look at it yet.
I may not have, okay. Okay, I actually frankly may have forwarded it.
I think you did.
But did not see the attachment perhaps. So, okay, all right, great. We can review that later if need be, but if that was in the email that included the process, I'd like to actually take a moment right now to review that process here now, which will take place tomorrow, just so we are confirmed that we're all on the same page with that. So members will be attending in person and or virtually, general forum members at the meeting, and there will be a unit vote at the meeting, and that unit vote will be taken separately from the COG general forum meeting. We have the opportunity, if we are on site at the general forum, to have a separate room in which members who are virtual and the public can call in to our unit vote meeting. Is that what everybody understands in terms of the process?
So no Zoom option for the breakout meetings, was that your understanding?
That
Just
is
phone
my
call, okay.
understanding. So my understanding is that if all of us, so we can talk about public and us. So like, I'm just walking through this because, right, we have limited time we should understand it going into it. So if we are physically present as board members, we will not need to use the telephone to call in and talk to each other. If we are virtual for the COG meeting, we will then need to call into a telephone number, into like a conference type of a phone call to have our discussion. That I'll just kind of like add a few items. So then my understanding is that before we go into that time, in the general forum meeting, we could ask questions and there would be a motion made. So then when we would go into our unit vote telephone call or presence in another location but still open to the public, another location within the COG building, we then deliberate on the motion. So basically, the deliberation of the motion happens after the motion is made in the COG general forum room, and it happens via the phone call in or in person at the general forum. So I guess my intention is to be in person at the general forum. Do others know? And I don't typically ask how you plan on attending, but there's an organizational component to this, so.
I am able to be there in person as long as we stick to the hour.
Okay.
If it starts to run over, I
Okay.
I have to run to a class at 1:30. so-
Okay, that's good to know. All right, and then,
I was planning to be virtual, but I can be in person, because I think that'll be easier if there's more of
Okay.
us there in person.
okay. And do you have that time run over of 1 hour as well issue?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, that's okay, it's okay.
Yeah,
Well,
but I'm-
it's
I
a
think they're gonna
special
be
meeting
strict.
and
I think
nobody
they're gonna
had
be
planned
strict.
on this.
Yeah.
So, right, so that's why it's ideal that we have this opportunity tonight to actually afford ourselves the ability to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so.
And I'll be in person.
Okay, all right, so, and also, I think that right now, my understanding is, while perhaps they want to hold us to that hour, I've never seen a meeting that had a guaranteed end time, so if I were an individual prioritizing in-person attendance versus being able to stay a little bit longer and having to be virtual, I would probably choose the virtual option. I just, right now, I can't envision how in 1 hour we have any questions and go to the separate room and do the call-in and then have the deliberation and then go back into general forum. Okay, so also that says to me that, so just one more comment on the motion, I'll take any, comment on the process and then take any questions about it before we move on to any more of the updates. So, if I understand then correctly too, applying Roberts, we would have amended that motion prior to going into the unit vote because the amendments to the motion don't require a unit vote. So if we, looking at the agenda, considering the motion that's currently on the agenda, wanted to change it in any manner, it would need to, if I understand correctly with the process, need to occur prior to going into deliberation for the unit vote. Because you would be then deliberating on the amended
On that,
motion.
right.
Okay? So any questions on that process? Okay, and there's no need for a commitment right now about in-person or whatever. Know that Patty and I are definitely in person. There's some flexibility here. So, all right, so Mr. Thompson, beat. So, okay, all right, thank you for that. Then next, I guess I just wanted to take us through just a few of the motions leading us up to this, because I don't know that all of us were present for that. And there is actually a kind of a chain of motions that have led to this motion. And then after I do that, I think I'll probably go to any questions on what's been presented, and then we can go into any discussion if need be. So leading up to the motion that is found in the agenda that has come out for the meeting tomorrow, there were multiple predecessors, and I'll just read them. From Facilities and Center Region Park and Rec Authority joint minutes from the 10/4/2022 meeting, so 2 months ago. The motion was the Center Region Park and Rec Authority asked the General Forum to consider the release of $625,000 from the $816,000 of undrawn restricted loan funds available that must be approved unanimously by the General Forum to be released. These funds are requested for the following purposes: $275,000 for project contingency funds, $250,000 for anticipated one-on-one grant match for the all-season pavilion, and $100,000 for funding irrigation for fields 3 and 4. And then, see, next thing I've got here is 10/11/1, which is the Facilities Committee agenda. The Facilities Committee, I'm sorry, I'm not going to read it again. It's the same motion. And then you have on 11/15, the Facilities Committee, Parks Capital Committee, and Center Region Park and Rec Authority meeting. You have The jointly assembled members of the Joint Facilities Committee, Parks Capital Committee, CRPR Authority recommend that the Finance Committee recommend to the Executive Committee and the General Forum that $578,974 in funds be released from the restricted loan funds in order to ensure payments to contractors for the completion of the initial phase of Whitehall Road Regional Park, and any funds not needed to complete this project be held in reserve for the upcoming projects at Oak Hall Regional Park and Hess Field. So just also to provide a moment of context, it is my understanding that on the at the 10/20 meeting of Park and Recreation Authority, that was the meeting where the change order was tabled. With the idea of not having the money to pay for it, or requesting the additional funds to pay for it. But at that same time, there was also a request for funding irrigation that was kind of making its way through the system from 10/4 to 11/1. So I think that, you know, the irrigation wasn't a funded item. And at that time, there was a perception, if I understand correctly, that there was not enough money to cover the change order, and also kind of in companion with a request for release of money for the irrigation. So now where we are with the request of the $574,000, I think there's an understanding that $339,000 of that are predicted to be used on not fully quantified future potential change order contingency draws. And approximately $244,000 of it are for paying for change orders, either for work completed or work, the two levels of change orders: work completed and to be completed, but has been incurred as an upcoming cost. So if that's the case, that is, if I'm doing my estimating correctly, that leaves approximately $240,000 left in the reserve funds. And the concern is that I think that the desire to make sure that the project can finish successfully involves us making sure that right now, when we get to that end point, that even with all that money, this tranche being requested and the 240-ish thousand that will be remaining, with all that we will indeed cross the finish line. So I think that had this been a decision at the December 20th General Forum meeting, we would have a little bit more time to review some of this information that we're in the middle of receiving, that we could have a more clear path to that finish line. So, right now, I think is our opportunity to generate any questions that could help us understand that we will indeed cross that finish line. So this could involve, just like our strategies for the budget reduction, it could involve multiple strategies. But what we're going to be looking at tomorrow is one of the strategies, which is release funds now. Just hearkening back to both the October 20th meeting, which is in the memo found in your agenda, where the project manager at that time states that there's really no need to prematurely, right, encumber more contingency, that the project really, at that time, was perceived to be in a situation of not needing additional funds until March or April. So, then additionally, at the Center Region Park and Rec Authority meeting, they discussed, just on December 2nd, work session, they discussed that at their next meeting, the idea that there was money in the budget, existing budget, to pay the change order that had been tabled. So I'm going to stop there and go to questions on materials, the motions, anything related to what's in your agenda in preparation for our decision tomorrow. If there's no other questions, I would go back to just an outstanding question about how the contingency changed, which is, I think, one of the outstanding questions.
Right.
So I think that our Park Authority representative really asked about that in December 2021 and was kind of looking out for that possibility and kind of trying to lay out a path for us, a successful path. To be honest, I'm not quite sure what happened after that point, but I did want to read this because I think it was something that warranted more attention, and I wish I would have given more attention to it, frankly. So just in the May 2021 meeting and of the Park Authority, and this was, well, I'll read the quote, and then if you have any context questions. So our Park Authority appointee said to the previous agency director, where she said, yes, that's everything we've talked about in the various meetings. Our authority rep said, okay, so certainly the cap of 1B, the loan option, as an amount will be challenged by whatever the new bids are. And if the new bids come in at a higher rate than the cap allows, there would be the opportunity for two possibilities. One, to go back to the general forum and ask for the sum of the contingency money that exists in the potential borrowing. Or the second choice would be on the part of the Park Authority to look at one of the reductions. But that choice would be made by the Park Authority if the bids came in higher than the limit of 1B. Is that accurate, COG staff? I think that's accurate up to the point of what is approved on Monday night includes the contingency factor. That's the $816,000. Our authority representative. Right, okay. I'm just trying to sort it out as to, it's my interpretation of what's being said that the decision to come back to look at one of the reductions, if the bids are over the 1B cap, that decision is ultimately is the authority's decision as how to move forward. At that point, I say, yes, that's part of why it's important, yes. And the agency director says, okay, Kathy, if Bill is done, your next actual speaker is Laura and then Dorothy. So at that time, it was really laid out that if those bids that resulted in the contracts that were eventually approved, if they were over that budget that's found in your agenda, the 1221 budget, right, that there would be a return to the general forum. And Ms. Strickland, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, because I know most of us haven't read the agenda that went out, but I think they do, and maybe this came up in another meeting too, about that process. I'm not even going to try to say the dates of anything or what meetings those things occurred, but once that funding was approved and we had the budget outline, we've heard on several occasions about how there was additional rock than was planned for land preparation and that kind of thing. All those costs were higher than expected. And I think just taking a quick glance at tomorrow's agenda, they were able to kind of break that down even more. So this could answer, we can ask this again tomorrow, but I think
Great.
this does offer some of that explanation about how option 3, which was the approved one, and then between December 21 and March 22, there were those, the proposed reductions in scope like parking and the practice field. And then there had also been some proposals to modify, maybe phasing stormwater management. I'm reading this really quickly. And then some of the earthwork that was projected to be done was projected to be a savings, and that couldn't be eliminated. So some of the, it's looking like some of that earthwork, stormwater accommodations, those things that had been suggested as the descoping couldn't occur. And so, yes, those funds were moved toward that. I agree that that's where we need to kind of break that process down and look at what structures are there that allowed that to happen. And I think, you know, it's, thank goodness Ferguson kept some of that money back, because now we're not in as big of a situation as we could be. So now we can blot that. But I think just looking at some of those big numbers that you're pointing out, if it's 300-some thousand to pay those outstanding bills that we know, and then that 200-some, that will be the extra or the contingency remaining, not including the remaining 200,000. So that gets us to that appropriate contingency. So I'm comfortable with all of that. I think that all makes sense. But I wanted to point out that I think they're answering some of the questions that we have here that we've had. I think they're acknowledging it needs to be looked at.
Thank you.
Here's what we found. And,
Yeah, I think that those change orders that you see about the bedrock encountering, I don't know, from what I can tell, looking through the bid package, it was indicated that there was no information about the subsurface conditions. I'm not sure. Anyway, yes, they definitely encountered rock that they didn't anticipate for the change orders. I want to go back, though, to something that you said, which is really a very important point, and it was when the de-scoping process occurred and what it was based on. So in May of 2021, in the agenda documents for the Center Region Park and Rec Authority, you'll find the document from Stahl Schaefer. It's attached in your agenda that talks about the 3 options for descoping. And in that document, you'll see that it's stated that it is compliant with stormwater assessment and land development needs, each of the options. When they initiated this effort to have Stahl Schaefer review that, they wanted that. That was a priority of the Park Authority. They wanted to make sure that those estimates were really secure. And then if you look at that meeting, May of 2021, when they received the information, you'll hear that they feel very secure about those estimates, the staff, because of the level of professional assessment that was done. In there, you'll see also those engineering drawings are included. And then just following that theme through of like, when did that change, right? Right now, we're just still trying to understand kind of what happened. So if you look at the draft bid documents that were included in the 1/20/2022 meeting, there is a draft notation that the expectation is that we would see a reduction of $900,000 when the final bids or when the final contracts are approved. So it was between 1/20/2022 and 3/17/2022 that the anticipated $900,000 savings that were noted as a draft in the draft bid documents on 1/20/2022, when it was realized that that would not occur. At the 3/17/2022 meeting, the option 3 budget was not included in the agenda. The contracts were, and the resolution to issue the contracts were, but the de-scoping process, based on engineering drawings, based on what our Park Authority member had confirmed, it didn't result then in the changes to that were needed. So, okay, so then let's just go back to that 12/20/21 budget. So for our new members, in particular, because this is also related to the structure of COG presentation. So the entity of the Park Authority and its relationship to the COG, the way that this project was coordinated between those two entities, we provide the funding, and then the Park Authority implements the project. Let me just read. So about that budget, I'm going to read you one quote from the December 16th, 2021 meeting to clarify that relationship, okay? Based on, and this is from the joint meeting agenda, December 16th, joint of Park and Recreation Authority. I'm sorry, I can go back to that, but anyway, here we go. It was Park and Rec Authority, I think Facilities, and Parks Capital, I think was that joint, but don't quote me on that. Okay, so based on the discussion held during Ferguson Township's Board of Supervisors meeting on Monday, December 13th, 2021, the board members remain in support of option 3 at this time, option 3 with the budget that is found in your agenda. Therefore, knowing that a unanimous vote was not obtainable, the general forum meeting scheduled for 4 p.m. on December 15th, 2021 was canceled on December 14th, 2021. At this time, because option 3 does not require any additional funding, but does require a reduction in scope, the authority has the option to move forward with option 3 without any additional approval from the general forum. So based on that budget, there was no additional approval needed from the general forum. So when the change was made, whereupon the contracts were executed for a surplus of that line item, and that line item for construction contracts in option 3 was $2,415,780. And then the contract issuance was, $4,909,727. So if you subtract 4.9 from 4.2, that's approximately $700,000. And so with the increase of the contract budget, the contingency budget was decreased. And so the decrease of the contingency budget at that time also set the stage for those change orders to be needed earlier, or the release of the contingency to be needed earlier to meet those change orders that were valid. So, yeah. If you look on the website right now of Center Region Park and Rec under the Whitehall Road Regional Park Project, you'll see that total budget, but you'll see that the contingency there is still noted as being the contingency from the 12/21 budget, which is approximately $250,000. But that must have changed.
But because at the last meeting, it was the authority meeting, it was stated that it was $75,000.
It was.
So, okay, are these questions that we're bringing tomorrow?
Well, I think a lot, like I said, I think a lot of this has been, like, I think that's what they're answering in the agenda, is how those funds got reapportioned, whether we agree with the process or not. That's reality, is we can see that where the money went. We can see it. It's all there. You know, we can see where things were redistributed. Process and our approval of that, or, you know, the structures that aside, we can see what's really there. So I think if there's
yeah.
additional questions on it, sure, I guess, you know, we'll probably have an opportunity tomorrow. I would offer too, I see, you know, what you're saying, and we can look back at the minutes. I think what also gives me, you know, confidence in moving forward would be a different management team that's on there now, and having the finance director more involved, is Joe Vigilone, you know, overseeing more maybe than he was before, would be my assumption on this. A new facilities manager, a new project manager, a new park director, even in interim, and then somebody else. So I think what you're saying, you know, clearly there's a lot that needs to be explored, clearly. And I think
Yeah,
I haven't heard anybody
it will be
disagree.
explored tomorrow, and I don't really have
Well,
the
yeah.
expectation because it's an hour meeting.
And I think they've offered what they can. I think in, for that, because that's just, you know, about that funding. So, I don't think there was an intention to open up the investigation of, you know, break open what we know. I mean, I think they've been doing that at the different meetings, trying to piece together what's happened.
Right, I think that the question that I have that's remaining is about the idea that if a project at its onset is, I'm gonna call it $700,000 more than expected in the budget for the contract issuance, and our loan reserve, I won't call it contingency because that's confusing,
Yeah,
was
right.
$816,000. And then we have a lot of change orders and unexpected costs that I'm gonna call $500,000, even though that could be incorrect. If you add the overage of the contracts, which was very close to the $816,000, there would be $116,000 left essentially in that contingency, loan reserve, sorry. So, so the way I'm thinking about this, and I hear what you're saying about the accounting, and I want to say right now, so appreciative of what COG staff is calling, not investigation, but their forensic
Not investigation.
analysis.
I mean, I'm saying,
Yeah.
you know, to look into it.
And I'm so appreciative of that.
Yes.
But I'm very concerned about, so we got some information today that unfortunately won't have probably a lot of time to process it. But I'm just very concerned about the possibility of the project crossing the finish line, given that kind of overall perspective of before they had any idea that they were going to encounter all that rock, before they even had an idea of that, there was a deficit of $700,000. So I can't see how that's going to work out, given that our change orders are in excess of $117,000. So that's where I am. And the issue is, right, that the opportunities to understand the way that we can cross the finish line there are many more now than there will be in May, after we've resumed the project. So my preference would be to just be a little bit more cautious, given that it's very possible right now for all the authority, bills to be paid by the authority. And so that's my thoughts. But any other questions? We want to answer any questions or compile any questions to be answered when we get into the COG General Forum meeting.
I'm feeling more comfortable now, having had time to digest the lot of information that came through, and I also just reading through the COG agenda, it's a really good summary, and I think that my takeaway is that, you know, the major mistake that we cannot repeat, and I don't think we can. This will, I think, have to be fixed in the future. Is that there's some part of the process that allowed either the authority or the staff to change the budget in such a way that reduced the contingency down to a number that's not, you know, it's not, you should not have, they should not have been allowed to put a budget in place that had a contingency of 1% ever.
Right.
That something else should have happened, right? They should have come back and said, we can't do this. Instead of trying to push forward, like trying to hope, right? It was based on hope, right? That they were going to get through on a contingency of $75,000, and that's just bad project management. And I hear and have read about the constraints about why they decided to do that. But we can't let that happen in the future. You know, I think we're close enough given how much work has been done and how little is left. I'm feeling comfortable saying yes and releasing the money now and letting the Whitehall project get to completion. But I'm really concerned as we move into Millbrook Marsh, another place where it has geologic issues in terms of trying to manage a construction project. That I don't want to see this repeat. So my preference would be to take up the motion tomorrow, say yes, release the additional funds, and focus our attention on what COG is going to do for future projects, so that this situation doesn't occur again. Because it does seem, again, because of the COG structure, we, as the electeds, are in charge of the total funding amount, is my understanding now, but we are not in charge of the details of the budget. That the authority and the staff put those things together, unless I'm missing something. So that disconnect to me is, I don't, that seems a little strange, to be honest. But I feel better about the disconnect if either the authority had a policy or COG itself had a policy about capital projects saying that you can't have a contingency, we can't approve a budget with a contingency less than 5% or 10% or whatever number they want to use. But if that were then I'd feel better about releasing money, so that we wouldn't be in this situation where we have to come back and ask for more funds again. But I at this point in time, I'm feeling comfortable releasing the money for Whitehall and taking our real concerns about how these capital projects work. We still need to push on that. I don't want to. I think having listened to the authority meeting, that there's some hesitation there about the other plan for how to keep the project going, about borrowing money from other parts of parks to do it, and it sounds like they do not want to do that, and I don't blame them. So I don't want the project to be in limbo any further. I think we can. I know I'm new, but maybe it's being naive, but I'm feeling confident enough that given the scrutiny that's already been put upon this, that they will get it over the finish line with the money we're going to release.
I don't know. I didn't have a chance to go through everything in the agenda, quite honestly. And I would love, so I think my problem has been that I feel like things have been sort of glossed over, and just in the hopes of getting to the finish line, so to speak, to get this park up and running, which is great. I sort of am going back to when this all began, and this has been my confusion all along, is that it's always, everything I always heard is from the get-go, this park had been underfunded. And I think when we even voted to go forward, everybody was, yeah, this park is absolutely underfunded. But there was a 3-2 vote here in Ferguson to move forward with this underfunded park. And so what I kept hearing was it's underfunded and we need more fields. And I totally appreciate both of those. Yes, we need more rectangular fields. But what I feel like all along it's been, we've been going after these rectangular fields, but I feel like there's been this second conversation about we need a tournament facility. And there's my disconnect, is that I feel like whether it's the history that's with Whitehall Road Regional Park, but so what I was understanding that we could get potentially 4 more fields out of this, suddenly there's lights and priority agreements, which is another topic I don't understand. And so I feel like there's been 2 different tracks all along, and I've never been able to bridge them. And so my frustration lies in this broken system that you're sort of referencing, and continuing to throw money at it. And it's a loan, we refinanced a loan, a reserve, not to, just for this park. It was, I thought, a big picture affair. And my other concern is that when this park in the beginning had an initial contingency budget of $200 and some thousand, and we've already moved the earth, the expensive part of it, etc., and so forth. Why are we, when the project is nearing completion or closer to completion than it was from the get-go, why are we still asking for a $200,000 contingency when that was the initial one with the $6 million park? And anyway, those, they're just, things don't connect in my head. There's been confusion, and I feel like there are side conversations that happen, and that's, as I said, priority agreements, which somebody was going to give money and now it's not there. I'm still confused. I'm still confused. And when I'm confused, my inclination is, no, you're not getting any more money. Figure it out, or work with what you've got. And then, but I agree, we need to pay the bills, 100%. If there is an outstanding bill that for work that has been done and it's not paid, that absolutely needs to be paid. Sorry, that's my.
Don't apologize.
I think I'm taking you into my world of frustration and confusion, and that's.
No, and I'd go back to what I said, you know, I'm glad that when we voted, that was the arrangement, was that we withheld those, the $800,000 for the reserve. I don't think it was going to be a surprise to anybody that the park was going to need it, because it looked like that was an appropriate contingency. So I think my optimistic view was, you know, they'll stay in budget, they'll get the grants they're seeking, and we can use that for the pavilion or something. But, you know, here we are. So I think, you know, I know we're over time, so I don't want to.
Well, I think that in this case, we're going to spend a little more time since.
Oh, and yes, and the other thing I wanted to
Please
bring
continue.
up, when Corey was talking about that, to continue looking at this, I think with the governance committee, I think this is unfortunately such a good example to use about how to move forward and improve those structures and systems and processes, because it is a very complex relationship between the COG, the municipalities, and the authority, and Parks and Rec. All of it is very, very complicated and was created at a different time when we had different assets, and I think it's the right time to look at that. Unfortunately, here we are in this before we had a chance to look at that, but, and I hear what Patty's saying about the fields, and the other part I think about is the Ella Abilities playground. And the equipment's already purchased for that playground, and, you know, we're far, like Corey said, we're far along in this park, and the equipment's purchased. I would feel very frustrated if I was a resident and didn't move forward. I don't think that, I don't think that a delay gives us better leverage in ensuring that there's a deep dive into what happened. I think that's going to happen if we make it happen. That's my sense. That's my opinion. So.
Great. I want to address a few things that have been said, and then we'll kind of wrap things up and with any discrete questions that we want to make sure are answered. What's that?
Are we having any public comment?
Sure. Let's wrap this up and then we can go to comment and then re-wrap up if need be. Couple of things. Not sure which one to start on. One, I think I want to start with the concept of, not sure, I believe it was you that brought up the idea of the authority not being comfortable with the idea of dipping into another line item to cover costs that should be in a certain line item. I want to agree with that so very much. Conceptually speaking, that's something that should be considered concerning in project management. However, that's exactly what happened on 317 and 318, right? The idea that one line item, which was the contract line item of 2.4 million, was increased to 2.4 million was increased significantly. That came out of the other line items. So the idea that was put forward in the authority meeting, that was Peter robbing Peter to pay Paul. That process would be a similar description of the mechanism that occurred when the contingency was changed. So I guess one could say two wrongs don't make a right in that case. But something that I want to jump to something that you brought to the table about the idea that at that time we all knew we would use that 800.
No, that's not what I said.
Okay, let me please restate. Yes.
No, what I said was we knew what the proposed budget was and what our intent of funding was, and then what we were holding in reserve. I can only look at it from my point of view and have my opinion on it. And when I look at it, I'm thinking our former manager had advised us this doesn't look like an appropriate contingency amount for this project. So the way I had processed it was, well, I think we can all see that this reserve amount would be the appropriate contingency amount. So I was comfortable holding that back, knowing it would go to the park in one way or another. And like I said, my goal, my ideal would be that it would go to an item that wasn't in that initial scope, like the all-season pavilion or something else. So that's what I'm saying. Is
That was the thought.
Yeah, and I could see that as I'm reading the minutes of the authority, that, you know, if you had given them the extra $800,000 up front, they would have spent it, right? Yeah. Like they wanted other things, right? A turf field, you know, like that if the COG had approved a larger number, the authority would have spent it, and we would be in an worse situation, right? Because we wouldn't have the reserve to try to make this, to try to fix the problem we're in now. So I'm feeling, you know, retroactively feeling similar to you, Lisa, in that that, you know, it's a good thing this money's here in order to help us finish this project off, even though that wasn't
the staff recommendation
or
the authority recommendation or the general forum desire.
Yeah, that wasn't the intent, right? Yeah. But it's good. It shows some foresight that you know, in order to deal with a complicated governance structure,
Thank you.
that I feel like that, you know, but now we're being asked to use it. I think we should use it. But I think,
Thank you.
But I think we should, I share your concerns, Patty, like reading through all that stuff, I was like, wait, Center Soccer Association said they were gonna give $1 million? You know, and it's not there now, and we're still putting lights in. You know, it's hard to read, right? But it's also the reality of a pandemic, the reality of inflation, the reality of a hard project, so.
Thank you so
All of
much
it.
for those comments. I just wanted to then jump back to the contingency perception. And the reason I want to kind of really focus on this is I think it's super important that we understand that whatever we had in our mind is one thing, but what was actually said to us as decision makers to validate our decision is pretty much, I guess that's all we've got, right? And so I think it's very important that we acknowledge that. So on January 20th, 2022 of this year, it was acknowledged about the contingency, this statement, right? The other thing was a question about the contingency, and that's when it was $253,000, not $75,000. It was 253, I'm sorry, let me get the exact number. $258,633. Okay, so that's what we're speaking about, that number. The other thing was a question about the contingency, and I think it's been made clear to the authority and will be touched on later as staff goes through this, but we, in the option that has been approved, option 3, budgeted for a contingency that is approximately 7 to 8% of the project. So there is contingency funds if we run into unknown situations or costs in the project. There is contingency. So there's not an expectation or an intent by design to go back to the municipalities and request more money of the $816,000. So there is not an expectation, there's not an expectation or intent to, by design, go back to the municipalities and request more money to fulfill the project scope, as we're just about to move forward within these contracts. So I think we're on good solid ground, and I just wanted to assure you that I checked into these things both with staff and the solicitor. So while we were indeed bringing up concerns about the low contingency, that concern was repeatedly addressed as it's fine. So there's only so much protection that we can build into this system, I think, when faced with these types of things. So, and then the last item is for a future item. So I think many of you have mentioned the future, protecting against these things. Some of you have, in this meeting or other meetings, mentioned maybe a misalignment or a question about our desire to build tournament facilities and the cost that is incurred. There may be some differences in opinion among the board members. There may be similarities in opinion. But in a previous board iteration of this board, we did request in a memo sent to COG General Forum, I think it was in 2021. So I think you would have been on, I think that you two would have been on the board.
I was on in 2021.
Where we requested that after phase 1 of after phase 1 of Whitehall Road Regional Park, this iteration of phase 1, which is a de-scoped version, maybe 4 times over in total, I'm not sure. But after this particular phase 1 version was constructed, that we requested to the authority and general forum that we review the master plans of the regional parks. So I would suggest that one item on the moving forward checklist would be to reconsider that request, because in addition to the structure, there's probably about maybe, I don't know, $30 million in outstanding investment. I'm kind of lost track with those master plans, but all the numbers are maybe 10 to 15 years old. So a reassessment at this point, now that we are post-pandemic, because what you'll hear is this is about promises, Freudian slip, promises that were made 20 years ago. So in the studies that have emerged, the surveys that have emerged since then, we've seen significantly different priorities from our residents. So I think that could drive revision of the master plan just in the future. So, all right, so let's wrap it up with any questions right now, then we'll go to any public comment and then come back and finish our wrap up. Any questions that the board members, including Jeremy, want to make sure are asked tomorrow before we move forward? Okay.
I would just maybe like to know, are there, and I'm not even sure if we're allowed to know if this is, because we're just providing money, but are there priority agreements out there on this park?
That, I think, is a good question. I know that there were 2 priority agreements. I don't know, I'm not sure of their status, so I think it's a good question. And then what's the expectation? There was one of them was for $1 million for this park. And there was an expectation of receiving that funding. And if we're now providing that $1 million, what would that $1 million now be used for?
Yeah.
So maybe we'd like some say in that. Even though that's not typically permitted to us.
I think it's a good way to state it too. What are the agreements, and what is the status of them, of payments, of, and maybe they're, I don't know, maybe they're void after a certain, I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Any other? Okay. All right. Okay, let's go to public comment. We've got Mr. Dave Stone on the video. Mr. Stone, please unmute and let us know your name and your municipality of residence. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is David Stone. And I live in State College Borough, but I'm representing tonight the Nittany Valley Environmental Coalition. And it's really going to be hard to be quick here, but I'm going to try. So we had made detailed comments, basically raising all of these issues back in December of 2021. And it was in response to those that Eric assured us that there was actually a 7 to 8% contingency. And, you know, it was very important and actually quite an achievement that Ferguson held the line and created that contingency, or that reserve fund. I agree with that. However, it became the contingency now, and it wasn't transparent. I mean, that's the thing that I think angers us. We had tied in those comments in December, we had tied it into issues with the bidding, the complexities, and all of these things that have come back to haunt us now. And, you know, even though there has been through your efforts, and particularly Laura's efforts, there's been more transparency, it has been hard earned and wouldn't have happened, in fact, if that money had been if that $16,000 had been part of the original appropriated funds, this would have all just gone by. Now, here's the problem. I think there are so many complexities with the withdrawal of Halbecker, the waivers that were issued, and the various de-scoping negotiations, which as we got deeper into looking at it, we see how really complex it was and that how many of the savings turned out to be illusory. I think this is the kind of thing that you guys are starting to delve into. It's very frustrating that $816,000 did not become the basis of bringing the community together and looking at some of these broader goals and reforms of the relationship between the Park Authority and the COG. So, and we went along with the compromise. I mean, just like you guys did. I mean, we felt that was an achievement. However, right now I have to say we are bitter. We feel we were lied to. Between January of 2022 and March, they took away the contingency we were promised, and it wasn't transparent. There was no discussion. I had been in discussion with Bill Keogh and others before January, and all of a sudden, all discussions broke away. I called Eric, and nobody was interested, because I think the intent all along was to tap into that 816,000 and not deal with creating broader public support. And, you know, if the intent of all of this is to create reform and public support, it's been set way back. This is frankly a scandal, and I think only more is going to come out. There needs to be a change of leadership now at the Park Authority. I feel like I was neglectful and not being aggressive enough. We try to negotiate things, but boy, I'm not happy, and I particularly don't like the way that they're packing this into a 1-hour meeting tomorrow, and that discussions like you guys are having tonight are not being encouraged all the other townships. And I would hope you would consider a way to keep your leverage, to build on your achievement of a year and a half ago of this 816,000. It's the only way you're going to get substantial reform, and we want to be a partner in that. It's just very frustrating to me, and I hope, Jeremy, by the time you're a bitter old man like I am, you will have learned this lesson a bit earlier in your career, because every time I try to, you know, be the peacemaker and the mediator, I feel like it's not long before you get hit in the backside. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Additional comments? Mr. Keough, thank you.
Bill Keough, Ferguson Township resident and your appointee to the Park Authority. I had no intention of speaking this evening, and so my notes are not well organized, but I do feel that I need to at least respond to some of the comments that you all have been wrestling with. Believe me when I say to you that the last 8 months have been very difficult also on my behalf as an authority member in terms of working through this project. Those of us that are on the authority are not there because of our professional expertise. We are there as community members appointed to serve the general public in the center region. And so we don't necessarily walk into that role with a skill set that can address every issue that comes before us. Bottom line, with regard to this stuff, where we were, where are we today, and how did we get there, are the three primary questions that I ask with regard to where we're moving with this. I feel in my role, it is my job on the authority to open a usable park in Ferguson Township in Whitehall Road. I feel that's my role. It's my job to get us to that kind of end game. Some of you have mentioned the overages and contingency things. As part of the original initial activity on this piece of property, test borings were done. But as you know, in the engineering world, and I don't live there, by the way, there is a pattern that one uses, and you get a general sense of what's underneath the ground based on those test borings. But then when you go to do the work, other things crop up, and they did. they particularly moved forward based on the trenching that we had to do to move our utilities through the project. And a trench is maybe, I don't know, 3 feet wide. Did we have a borehole in that hole, in that spot, on all of this acreage? I don't know. But the rock issue, while it was not a surprise, its location was not anticipated based on test borings. We were going on the basis of the information we had, and it was solid information based on the engineering process that occurs. When I'm dealing with where we were and where are we going, as a result of this project, the authority, along with the COG staff, have reworked the entire management process for this project. Completely reworked it. And it is professional staff's position that we are in a far better place to move this project forward than we were a year ago. In the course of that process, 2 of the principals are gone. And we're moving forward with a process that we feel pretty confident in terms of the authority as far as the management team goes. We mentioned governance, and boy, we know that the governance system that's currently designed as it relates to park and recreation in COG has outlived the original design. It's not because anybody has made knowledgeable mistakes. It's just that it outlived where we're at. And with a project such as this, those weaknesses, those areas of need to revamp that whole process clearly jump to the surface. The authority is fully aware of that, although I can't speak for the authority. I am fully aware of that, and I know that several of our members are as well. You mentioned, and again, I apologize that these are not in order of any kind, but you mentioned tournaments. Let's talk about tournaments and tournament facilities. We have the data to tell us that we need the rectangular fields for our own residents during the week, and we need them badly. We even need them on Saturdays and Sundays for some of our programs, soccer programs especially. But for some reason, people jump on this tournament thing and say, hey, we're not using tax money to build tournament fields. The tournament aspect of the fields is in fact income producing. We're not our own teams in any of our sports are going to go to tournaments. That's part of the structure of those sporting contests and that program, whether that or softball. They're going to go somewhere. Having some of those tournaments at home is a huge advantage to our local teams because our parents don't have to have motel rooms for 3 days, spend an inordinate amount of money on food and all of those kinds of things, because they go home every night. Do we have outside teams come in? Oh, yeah. But that's part of that process of the sport that we're supporting as a region. We talked, I heard some comments about we have money in this project that is unspent at the moment. It's assigned to work that is yet to be done, but it is unspent. Now the question of, well, let's use some of that money to take care of the contingency issue. And that's part of where I came up with it, because I didn't, but the whole issue of robbing Peter to pay Paul. That means that we've got to come back to the COG at some other point and ask for money for project work that we've contracted for. Doesn't make a lot of sense. If you talked to the money people, our own COG financial advisor, they'll tell you that's a terrible practice in reality. So, well, I think Laura mentioned that we had done it once before. And she also mentioned tonight, 2 wrongs don't necessarily make a right. And that's where I'm coming from in terms of the fact I don't want to do that again. And I don't feel we should. We conducted, and I don't know how this is done, gang, but our financial people conducted a forensic audit of the money involved in this project. And based on the forensic audit that was done, nobody's absconded with any money, okay? It can be accounted for. The way it was used has some problematic issues related to it, but nobody took any money inappropriately. No contractor got money inappropriately, and no employee got money inappropriately. It was all verified and accounted for. We could, and the engineer that was on staff but is no longer on staff did state that the amount of work to be done, left to be done, could be shut down and restarted in the spring. But he also said multiple times to us, at least, in public meetings to my knowledge, that it depends on the winter. Until the ground freezes, we can do ground work. Now we've got moisture to worry about, rain and snow, but it all depends on the winter. What we have been told is that if we shut it down now, done. The contractors that are working on the subsurface work will pull their equipment, and it will probably cost us in a billing process around $60,000 to restage that equipment in the spring. In addition to that, we have some security concerns about the property itself. couple of the fields have been seeded. We've got a building up there. And so some expenditures are going to have to be made, and I don't know what they are, for security issues related to the property if we leave it now.
Bill, I just want to interject for 1 minute, and I appreciate all this feedback. I'm writing like crazy here of all these ideas that are coming into my mind, but I just wanted to make sure that anybody who's listening or hearing this, right, we're having a dialogue here, but I don't want them to dip in at the certain point and think that what we're discussing is delaying the project until March or April. I think that that's valuable information in the context of having a special meeting in such a kind of a rushed way.
And I'll get to that.
My personal opinion on that, based on not getting any sleep, not eating, canceling doctor appointments, et cetera, to manage all of that as the chair. So I think that the assertion here is, why not December 20th? So we can have more opportunity for some questions that are outstanding to be answered. I'll get to them later, but I just wanted to kind of level set for everybody that that's not the discussion that's occurring right now about shutting down the project. The question that had been entertained was, why would the authority not pay those change orders and make sure that the project is continuing? And then, just to kind of refer to some of the dialogue that happened in the 10/20 authority meeting, was a little bit different than the dialogue we're having now. And then it was kind of talked about as the tabling and not paying of the change order was a statement. Not sure to whom, but that was definitely said in that 10/20 meeting, so we're kind of working out some of those things as well. So let me let you resume there, and then we'll go back to wrap up with a few more questions, and then we'll wrap it all up. And then have other public input, and then we'll go that and wrap it up. Thank you. Yes, continue. Thank you, Bill.
The authority doesn't have any control over this timing business. For the most part, we're out of that formula. The COG and so on is involved with that. The issue of the 20th of December and tomorrow and all of that stuff is not something that we're involved with, and we didn't have any opportunity to provide any input for it from the authority. So it's not part of our issue. However, there has been an issue or statements concerning what, if we, depending on how we vote, whenever that is, tomorrow or the 20th, what are the ramifications of that vote? And it needs to be said, at least, that one of the ramifications has to do with some expenditures of dollars that are not budgeted for, and $65,000, $70,000, maybe a little more than that when you get done with the fencing that we might have to put up and the security, et cetera. That's a significant amount of money, and it's taxpayer money. When we, the authority, found out about the overuse of the $75,000 contingency that was in the original plan, when we found out about those expenditures, the chair of the authority said, we're done. I will sign no more contingency expenditure things, and we haven't. Well, I take that back. We have signed at least one because it was a plus. Yeah. It wasn't a minus. We were getting some money back instead of, but, and we still haven't signed any of those requests. Those are the unpaid bills. The authority none of us are in the position of estimating what the planned and unplanned contingencies are going to be. Boy, that's such a slippery figure. It just depends on a whole bunch of things that aren't in our control. That's why they call them contingencies, I guess, or whatever. But You will never get a hard figure on that. That's why typically a project looks at 10% as a reasonable contingency figure. And even then, you can overspend the 10% if you've worked with a project the size that this is. So I appreciate, one of the last things that was brought up was priority agreements. To fund a project like this, is not a straightforward, the authority asks, you give it, it gets done. Mixed into that formula are grants from the state, and we have some. In addition to that, there's private donations that are mixed in as well. So when you ask about priority agreements, there are a couple that I am generally aware of as part of the funding formula to get the job done that I feel is my responsibility, namely to get a usable park at Whitehall Road. And so it is a combination. It's not a matter of it's all your money. A big part of it is your money, absolutely. But the grant money is there, and we, up until the time that we lost the director of Center Region Park and Recreation, we were actively seeking and securing private money here in the region for additional costs and or amenities to put in the park right from the beginning. So I appreciate the opportunity to at least say these things to you. I apologize for not having a prepared statement. It all came as a result of your conversation. I think the bottom line, I think we've got the system in place. Oh, there were apparently some missteps with regard to some things that weren't done that were to be done by contracted groups. We know about them, and we're going to look at recovering dollars that those missteps cost. But I gotta tell you folks, we're so knee-deep in getting this project taken care of that we're not contacting our attorneys and heading down a lawsuit or whatever it might take to recollect those monies. But those monies are there to be collected. Just don't make us use those and that process to get the job done. That's about all I can say about that stuff because a lot of that is confidential and legal matters. But we are aware that some of that occurred, and we are intending to recover some of the costs that were related to those missteps. We're just not, that's not a high priority right at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill. Thank you for kind of,
Winging
stream
it.
of consciousness.
Winging it.
It was well done, and it's something that we all are kind of used to in these hot seats. So you really, I'll recap later after we finish up with citizen comment, and I just wanted to say that I am going to continue to allow this time for this because we won't have it tomorrow, and we're going to then recap. We have other citizens that want to speak, and then we'll do a pretty quick recap. Okay? Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Next up to the mic. Thank you.
Good evening. Omari Patterson here in Ferguson Township, Ward 2. I'll start with why I originally came here, and that is because my child plays on arguably the best 11-year-old soccer team in Center County. And it is not arguable how terrible the fields are that they play on today. So I was very much like, hey, what's going on with this regional park? How quickly is it coming? And so as I read the agenda and some of the documentation, I immediately, my head started spinning, headache, what is going on? So my child will be fine on the existing fields, especially if I tell him that this body is making responsible decisions fiscally and structurally. And I want to highlight the structural part, because Ms. Denny, just reading your memo, there were some just alarming things in there that hit on a couple of recommendations. And number one is, I think our township needs to pay a few bucks and get an owner's rep. And that is someone that's kind of understanding where the project is. They're acting on our behalf. There's no conflict of interest. They're not acting on a group of 5 or a group of 10 or both groups, because it's very clear that what I'm hearing is that there's been some, overlapping kind of buddy, nod, wink type of things, which is all well and good until we get here to this situation where it's like, we don't have any money, we need more. And it's just not fair to what seemingly is us, as we're having to release Ferguson Township money, and I'm curious where everyone else is with their contributions. That's probably something you guys can get to. And then, at least in the last bit that Mr. Keel was mentioning, there's probably an executive session, because I've heard varying opinions from the board on this, but it seems like not everybody's in the know of some of those things that would surely kind of sway some thoughts and opinions on, where are things, and maybe give those that I think I'm hearing some comfort, some discomfort, but maybe that are uncomfortable about getting to the end. It may help you get more comfortable knowing that there is some awareness of some missteps that didn't quite, there were missteps. Back to my owner's rep comments, just having some of the verify, I think I saw that there's some vendors that are 95% complete and 40% paid. Whose numbers are those? That's something that absolutely needs to be confirmed by someone that's not writing that document up, right? I think from what I'm reading, the structures that are set up right now, kind of this authority, this cog, the who does what, who's allowed to obligate the township from those organizations, and I think that was in a discussion earlier about an elected member being on some of these boards versus not, and that is an odd thing to me. This is new, so I readily admit it's new to me. But that's odd to me that another entity can obligate you guys to then obligate me. That's ridiculous. So I would recommend that you look into that structure, modifying that structure as quickly as possible, getting our attorneys involved and saying, how can we get this to something that's more sustainable, something where you guys can have the appropriate checks and balances. I think I heard about one thing I didn't hear about was, I know that there's some other monies, I think Mr. Keel mentioned there's all the other funds. what is being done to generate more funds outside of just public dollars? The organizations that have committed funds, where are they with their commitments? 10%, 20%, 0%. And then taking some action and getting some very clear milestones for some of those entities. Again, this is they didn't pay, so hey, Ferguson, pony up. I'm uncomfortable with that, because guess what? It's going to happen again, guys. I have a slightly, I think I heard at one point that there is a number of there's a new group, and they're going to get this to the finish line. And I have a slightly different experience with new leadership, new managers, new across the board, and it isn't nearly as good as what I think there's some projection with the projection that I'm hearing. I guess I'll leave it there. I just haven't had good experiences when you replace the whole team, and then it costs more money. There's more time. There's just as many mistakes. It's just a new group making them. So I would just be cautious there in thinking there. And last but not least, this is a building a field. So rock happens. It does. So I wouldn't worry about that. I wouldn't worry about the contingency for it, the fact that there was contingency. Those, like when you're moving dirt, there's something down there that you got to deal with, and no one knows. So I wouldn't put too much into that. I think back to my prior point. It's really about the funding sources. That's where the rub is. These projects are complex that have 25 funding sources. And you're waiting on 2 of them to come in. You've got to bridge funding. And so who's doing that financing strategy for this funding and for these funding sources? So I will close by saying I've got an 11-year-old, again, that is excited to play on some really good fields, and I'm excited for this project to finish. I'd like this project to finish on time, whatever that time is. I don't even know what's the date, on budget and within scope. And I think we've got to put the structures in place for that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Any other public comment before we wrap up? Okay, seeing none, I'm gonna try to take the helm here on the wrap up of the public comments and some additional questions I'd like to see, and then welcome other board members to do that, and then we'll close it. Okay, so first I'm just gonna try. What I tried to do is make a list of all the questions that my mind thought of as the individual spoke, and then also have 1 or 2 items for a future question based on their thoughts. Okay, so first, just confirming that we would like to understand the status of the priority use agreements, and then I'll add, we would like some clear milestones established in terms of them being met. Then it brought to mind a question for me, some other conversation comments, that the Musco light payment, I have an outstanding question about that. So when I'm looking at the most recent document, the Musco lights were to come out of the FF&E budget, and then I'm looking at project contract amounts and commitments of the FF&E budget, and it's completely committed less $35,000. The Musco lights were, the purchase order for the Musco lights was signed in December of 2020. So that's 2 years ago. So the purchase order for the Musco lights was signed in 2020. It was to come out of the FF&E budget. It does seem to reflect that that amount is committed, but there's a question of whether the Musco lights have been paid for. So the question is, have the Musco lights actually been paid for out of that budget, right? There was perhaps some communication that maybe there was an outstanding payment.
Are you asking me, Chair?
Well, could you, I'm sorry, could we not interrupt, and we're not going to go back to citizen comment at that point because we're wrapping up.
Are you asking me,
And
Chair?
I don't need to ask you, I can ask tomorrow. But I explained why I'm asking the question. That the purchase order was initiated in 2020. Okay, so then, 3, can staff, so then this is another question. So there was some, I think there's some question of whether the project can be completed, and I think a direct question to staff tomorrow is what needs to happen. Just stop all the questions, the additional questions, and the question is, can staff tomorrow guarantee that with the release of this money, that the project will reach completion? Right? It's a good question. Okay, so, and then this relates to something Mr. Patterson mentioned about the concept of bridging, the bridging of the funding and how that is very important. So I have no project management experience, but realized early on how important that would be, particularly when the delay created from the light installation with the seating and the crane and the et cetera, and the permit and that cascade of effects, right? And how that delay, actually that delay, which, how do you quantify that in a project? Well, probably with your contingency, which was gone. But that delay further incurred costs, right, that could have not been incurred had there been, I don't know, multiple kinds of bridging, timing bridging, money bridging, et cetera. So the question is, kind of related to that conceptually. When the grants and donations are reimbursed, what will occur with that money? Because what we think we understand is that by the release of this fund, the project will reach completion, but then I think in DCNR grants, there's an expectation of, don't quote me on this, approximately $600,000 in funds that will then be given upon certification of occupancy. And then there would be, I don't know, any other outstanding that I really couldn't think of. If that's then reimbursed to the project, but the project is complete, then there would be an additional $600,000. How is that planned to be used? And then this goes to the bridging idea. So like, if what we're doing is bridging, and that's going to be reimbursed to our taxpayers, it takes me a while, but eventually I get it. If that's going to be reimbursed to our taxpayers, right, is that something that can happen conceptually? So it's a concept we're exploring. And then 5 is, can we quantify the cost of the delay from the light installation? And this is, again, that's just a question. It doesn't need to be answered tomorrow. I'd like it to be asked in the general forum, because the lights were to be donation and grant funded and not to come out of the loan budget. Okay, so what are the costs of that? Again, for the future, for accountability purposes, or just that understanding. 5, 6. This is for later, and was something that 2 of our, maybe even 3 of our citizens mentioned. Our authority rep mentioned that we have the data on the rectangular fields. Okay, My recollection of this conversation is that it has been circular and occurring for 7 years that I have been on the board. And that is, we need more rectangular fields. How many and where do we need them? We need more rectangular fields. How many and where do we need them? I think it was in this past year that the authority changed, wasn't broken. They just ended their agreement with the SCASD for 3 fields that were used for soccer and baseball because they said that they no longer had the demand for them. So what kind of rectangular fields? Because those of us that don't necessarily have children in those, right, we hear things about sizes of the fields mattering, and at Whitehall we made bigger, quote, tournament size fields, and who needed them in terms of the kids versus the smaller non-tournament regulation fields, and who do they serve, so we can have our inventory match the demand. So if the data lies with the park authority, but the municipalities are the primary ones that invest in the parks, and then just caption for that. So right now we're spending a lot of time talking about one regional park, but the municipalities invest in an additional, I'll call it 48 parks of all sizes and shapes. And so, for example, what that means for us in Ferguson Township this year in our capital improvement plan, it's $1.8 million of investment. So that's a lot. And so having data that the authority has to drive our choices in investment, this is something I've been saying over and over again, trying to get access to the data, that will be very helpful in us being cooperative and meeting the needs, and maybe in a perhaps less expensive way than in this particular facility. And then one other note, there is just multiple notations about the restroom portion. The restroom the restroom budget and build is based on the maximum capacity of a tournament facility, including the playground, walking trail, and other amenities. So, you know, that choice about the tournament facility versus the rectangular fields for local kids is a future question that we really need the data as municipalities and the park authority together so we can provide enough amenities in a financial efficient way. So then last thing that is actually a question for tomorrow, I'm sorry I missed the order, that was to be said before this. In the FF&E budget, in the itemization of the FF&E budget, there are some items like goals and other like field amenities. The last I remember reading of the contracts, those were also included in contract number 1 for site moving. So just the question that I want to have answered then tomorrow is, are those 2 different sets of goals? So the one set of goals in the contract might be for the one field, and then the other grouping of costs in the FFE might be for another field, or maybe they're duplicates, or maybe the goals were removed from contract 1. We don't know. So this just also relates to assuring that we have all the money to complete all of these things, right? So just understanding that. And those were the only questions either that came to my mind or that I wanted to kind of bring into our questions tomorrow from our residents. So anybody else have anything or any thoughts on any of those? Okay.
My only thought is that we probably should prioritize the questions,
okay,
just given the short nature of the meeting. I'm going to assume it's highly likely we won't get to them all.
Yep.
And so it'd be good to ask the ones that might change our thinking about
Okay.
the vote we're going to take tomorrow, which, you know, for me, the biggest one is, will the staff say
Yes.
that they can complete the
Yes.
project
I agree.
if we release
Yep.
this money?
Yep.
And, you know, that would be the one question that I would want to make sure we ask, and it's
Okay.
a direct one, and it's
Yep.
hopefully an easy one for them to answer, and
Sounds
then,
good.
then the staff, you know, will be on the record
Yep.
saying that that's the case.
Great,
And if
great
we have to come
advice.
back-
Did you hear that, Bill?
Prioritizing
Sorry, Bill.
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Bill.
Yeah.
I
Prioritizing.
was suggesting we prioritize the questions. We're not going to have enough time in our 1 hour meeting to ask all of those, and we need to prioritize the questions that might actually affect the way that we vote. And for me, the one question that I want to see answered by the staff, or the executive director, for that matter, of COG, is to say that if we release this money, the project will be finished without asking for more money.
Thank you.
I would agree with that, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you. That will be my intent.
There's an issue with that.
Well, we'll explore that tomorrow then. That would be important to explore tomorrow. So my intention is to capture the questions that I just reviewed, copy you all, and send them to the COG chair. So there is no surprise, and I will prioritize in that email that first question, but make sure they have them in advance. And I probably will leave off the question about our future question. So that's just for us. Okay. Anything else before? Go ahead.
The only thing I was going to mention was I just wanted to note something I was happy to see in the motion, how it's changed slightly, I think, from how it was before, where there's even greater, how do you want to say, insulation of what the funds can be used for. So they were very specifically determined to only be used to ensure payments for contractors' fees, materials, and supplies for the completion of the initial phase 1, whereas before I think it only had, I'm not sure it had all of that very specific language in the motion, and so here it kind of goes, yeah. So I know that it had previously excluded irrigation in the pavilion, and so now they're, oh, okay, I thought it had, but here it does.
Yes.
It excludes
Yep.
those things and restricts it to just paying the bills for the initial phase 1. So just adding, again, that layer of confidence about where those funds are going, so.
So
appreciated
thank you for
that
bringing that up.
addition.
I want to just, so we all know where that came from. So that, Lisa, in consultation with you, when I was going into whichever the last meeting was that generated that, I'm sorry, I can't name it right now. I moved that the motion be amended based on your recommendations to further be specific. And so just the word of encouragement I'm giving here is that it's okay to consider modifying a motion, because sometimes it results in further clarity and comfort in moving forward. So, thank you. Okay, let's wrap her up and let's move on to, I believe it's going to be our consent agenda. Yes, new business with our consent agenda. This evening we have the September Treasurer's Report for acceptance and the remainder of the consent agenda for approval. I'll entertain a motion.
This is Patty, motion to approve the consent agenda as listed in the agenda.
Do we have a second?
Lisa, I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Next up, review of the draft 2023 Ferguson Township Schedule of Fees. Ms. Martin to introduce.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Provided with the agenda as a narrative, I can quickly summarize it for you. Annually, the board adopts a schedule of fees for the township, and provided with the agenda, you'll find a drafted version of the schedule of fees. The board is being asked this evening to authorize advertisement of a resolution adopting the 2023 Ferguson Township Schedule of Fees for Monday, December 13th. I will note that what is provided in the agenda is what will be carried over for adoption on December 13th, with one exception, and that is an update from the Codes Office on their numbers, which is standard and routine in terms of just getting the addition of what they provided the township just a few days ago. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, any questions about the information Ms. Martin has presented? Okay, sorry, please say my, please. Okay, we have a motion that we'll entertain at this time. On in your agenda.
This is, go ahead.
Go ahead, Lisa.
This is Lisa. I'll move that the Board of Supervisors authorize advertisement of a resolution adopting the 2023 Ferguson Township Schedule of Fees for Monday, December 13th, 2022.
This is Patty, I'll second.
Thank you. If no further discussion, all right, all in favor, please say aye. Oh,
Aye.
sorry. Sorry, Jeremy.
I had some
Sorry to
items
breeze
to
right over
address.
that. Yes, sir, please do. Yes.
Sorry about the delay. I was noticing we do have on the schedule of fees a bad check charge. I'm wondering, considering what the Biden administration has brought down about junk fees and how banks can't charge for checks that may come back with insufficient funds. I'm just wondering if there's some items we need to maybe take a look at there, or even like define what we're calling a bad check. The other item, it was under, find it here, it was under, it was on page 5, peddling, soliciting, and transient retail permits. When I was actually on the planning commission, we were talking about a different ordinance where the ordinance originally was using the term peddling, and we did have a member who had advised we come up with a different term, as peddling has in some definitions a not so politically correct definition. So we may want to consider a different term, like maybe a vendor.
Thank you, Jeremy. So I'm hearing just two language questions. I think my question about the peddling is that aligned with a current ordinance right now, that language?
The word peddling?
Yeah. So we'd have to do a deeper change if we wanted to change it here, is my hypothesis there.
Very possibly, but
Okay.
I couldn't be 100% accurate without
Gotcha.
confirming.
But it would be a future question if there's maybe a desire for language change, that it be aligned with ordinance and whatnot. I'm not opposed. I'm sure others probably aren't. But in terms of this particular document. And then the bad check charge question, that perhaps could be more easily remedied. I wonder if we could say return check charge. I don't know if that would be appropriate to consider, because we could do that at this. Could we do that at this point without incurring any delays? Because if not, we can do it,
If we're just replacing the term bad with returned for the check, that would be fine. That's what I would consider an insignificant change to the document. We could still proceed with adoption on December 13th.
I will say that I did happen to catch out of the corner of my eye Finance Director, Mr. Anderson, also shaking his head yes, so we've got multiple nods. So let's entertain,
It's non-sufficient funds checks, where basically they don't have the money in the account to pay for it at the time when they try to cash it.
So we now actually have a more correct term, which is non-sufficient fund checks.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we would then do is receive a motion to amend the schedule of fees to replace the word bad in check charge with the words insufficient funds check charge. And so if anybody wanted to offer that motion, we could entertain at this time, a motion to amend, we could offer that. Oh my.
This is Patty, so moved.
Thank you. All right, so Patty has moved that amendment, Jeremy. Anyone care to second it?
I'm just kind of hesitant, would the township, considering what had recently been brought forward by the Biden administration be allowed to charge an insufficient check funds because it's my understanding a bank can't charge that fee. So would we be allowed to do the same?
So I appreciate your comment, and certainly staff can take another look at this. Generally, when we bring this to the board, we've considered these legislative changes, but that's not to say that certainly comments like this don't give us another go around and take another look. And I will say that if that is the case, I mean, we certainly would not want to adopt anything that would present a conflict for the township. I'm quite confident that what's been presented to you is not in violation of any state or federal statutes. So I can assure you that this will come back to you as is, or we will bring back to you an additional version. But my recommendation to the board this evening would be to proceed forward, and if we do need to do an amendment, we'll bring that forward at the same time with that acknowledgement.
Wonderful. Okay, so what we have right now is just a motion to amend the language, which we are free to do. We don't have a second yet.
I would second.
Okay, now we have a motion to amend the original motion by changing the word bad check charge to insufficient fund check charge. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to amend, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Okay, and now we're back to the original motion. Any further discussion on original motion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, and thank you, Jeremy. And we are on to the next item, which is the authorization and approval for payment to NTM Engineering, INC, for the submission of the supplemental agreement 5 for the Park Hills Drainage Way Improvement Project. This will be introduced by both Centrise Martin, Township Manager, and Dave Modricker, Director of Public Works. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So provided with the agenda is a summary, a pretty detailed summary that itemizes the supplements that have been provided to NTM with a little bit of background and summary on how we got where we are today. The township, it says here in your agenda that we began a professional contract with NTM in November of 2018. We actually entered into an agreement with them back in 2014. But the supplements began in 2018. So I just want to give that acknowledgement. And as you know, there is an ongoing active project with the Park Hills Drainage Way Improvement Project. And this is indeed part of it is indeed the project to which is being discussed. In May of this year, our township engineer brought to the attention of the Director of Public Works and myself that NTM had submitted to the township a supplement, which was referenced as Supplement 5, for the township to pay $150,000 for work that was already performed. Essentially, the township had not authorized or granted this supplement, so NTM was performing this work without what we consider unauthorized work. I will also note that in times of coming through what I'll refer to as the COVID recovery, and while we had some transition changes, those are notable, but certainly not justification to perform work outside of authorization from the township. Generally, I want to bring to the forefront that this is an item as per our home rule charter the manager can authorize without bringing to the Board of Supervisors. I bring this to the board, however, because of the unique circumstances to which staff spent time since May negotiating, namely Director of Public Works, myself, and the township engineer, and some deliberations with NTM. And thankfully, everything was quite amicable. While they did approach us to pay for $150,000 through conversation and understanding of some of the expenses that had they brought that to us, we would have reviewed, and there would have been certain fees that we would have approved, particularly ones that reflected changes to requirements, for example, through UAJA or other things that would have been out of their control. And so the dollar amount is actually in the agenda, $55,056.76 is what we came to terms on agreeing. Again, I bring this to the board to support that level of transparency and opportunity to keep everyone aware of some of these unique circumstances that I think we're hearing and seeing is happening in the region, as and I think there's a level of acknowledgement that this is something that is happening post-COVID. But in the instance here, Ferguson, the staff here, we took a position where we were not going to pay, and we were going to talk through that and find a position that we were all comfortable with. So prior to me giving my signature to that, I wanted to bring this to the board. Again, I am looking for your approval. There's a motion provided in the agenda, and really just your support and understanding that this level of transparency and process is due appropriately and respectfully. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Modricker, is there anything that you wanted to add?
Only that the work on this project started in 2018. The previous contract that the manager referenced was probably on another project.
Very good, very good.
It's irrelevant. I have but it's this project, the township, but yes, the supplements began with this contract being signed in 2018.
Thank you for the clarification, the additional information, and I think what I really want to comment on, and then we'll entertain a motion, is just my gratitude in staff bringing this to not only the board, but the public. Also gratitude for entering into the negotiations in a fair manner. All right, that was what that was, okay. Yep. Just a moment to understand the impact. Did we lose our Zoom? Uh-huh.
Yes, that is exactly what happened.
Okay. I feel like we should take a recess. I'm going to call for a recess for a technical
You can't
difficulty.
take this here.
We're recessed. Sorry about that. Sorry about that technical difficulty. We took a recess for that whole time. So you all didn't miss anything, if you were worried. No missing. Okay, so we're about to come out of recess now. All right, so we will resume the meeting.
Okay.
Somebody help me remember.
Thank you. Yes, I
Street
think that,
We were.
We're about to make a motion.
Oh, we're about
Yes,
to.
we were.
Fantastic.
On the NTM.
Yes.
Okay, so many thanks to the staff, and we would entertain the motion found in your agenda on this item about the NTM supplemental agreement number 5.
I'll move that the Board of Supervisors approve the supplement and authorize the Township Manager to approve and submit payment to NTM Engineering in the amount of $55,056.76.
We have a second.
This is Patty, I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously, and thank you. All right, we'll move on to award of contract 2022 C15 street tree pruning. This will be introduced by Mr. Dave Modricker, Director of Public Works, who's always at the end of our agendas. Poor Dave Modricker. All right, Mr. Modricker, please, thank you.
Sure. Within your packet is a memorandum regarding contract 2022 C15 street tree pruning. We opened bids on Tuesday, November 29th. A number of us were in attendance. We received 2 bids. Cutting Edge Tree Professionals, $79,950. Dincher Tree Surgeons, $88,230. I will note that we initially had planned to prune about 800 trees, and the budget for this item is $52,000 at an average rate of $65 per tree. And just as a note, I looked here last year, we pruned 974 trees for $58,480, or about $60 a tree. So I had included about an 8% increase. That would get us to about $65. During the preparation of the contract, we had a discussion about prevailing wages. And I did contact Department of Labor and Industry, and a prevailing wage determination was received. Anticipating higher tree trimming costs, before we put it out to bid, the number of trees to be pruned was reduced from 800 to 519 trees. Even with this reduction in the number of trees to be pruned, the low bid exceeds our estimated cost. Bids were competitive, as you can see by the 2 bids that were received. In talking with one bidder that attended the pre-job, he attributed the higher cost to the inclusion of the prevailing wage requirements. Should the Board of Supervisors desire to award the contract, I anticipate we'd still be under the line item budget, the 01455-450 contracted services, mainly because there's other items under that line item that we completed under cost or work that was not required. So if we awarded this contract, total expenses under item 455-450 would be about $121,000. Options, the board could direct staff to change the scope, put it back out to bid with only trimming maybe 300 trees. That would probably likely get us closer to our budget of $52,000. I just note that with 4,500 street trees, if we continued with this approach, it'd take about 15 years to complete a round of tree pruning. And the tree commission recommends we prune trees 5 to 7 year intervals. We could not award the work at all this year. That's another option. I am recommending that the board consider awarding the contract to Cutting Edge Tree Professionals in the amount of $79,950. Staff will continue to evaluate the most cost-effective means to maintain our urban canopy with both in-house and contract forces. At that, I can answer any questions you may have as you try to make your decision.
Thank you so much for that transparent and informative presentation of this information. All right, do we have questions? Okay, it looks like we're ready to entertain a motion at this point.
This is Patty. I move that the Board of Supervisors award contract 2022 C15 street tree pruning to Cutting Edge Tree Professionals in the amount of $79,950.
Second?
Second, this is Corey.
Okay, any further discussion? I'll just add that I think it's great that you mentioned that you're going to be continuing to look ahead at, keeping that cost as good as you can while maintaining our street trees. So I think that the board probably will look forward to hearing more on that in the future as we continue to navigate the inflationary scenario that we're all existing in right now, whether it's kind of going to change or this is the new normal, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for that. If there's no other comments, we'll take a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. We're on to communications to the board. Any communications?
Several on the park, on Whitehall Road Regional Park, and just one on the budget that we mentioned earlier. That's it.
So interested to hear about the Whitehall Road Regional Park comments. Yeah, Jeremy.
I too have received several letters of support on Whitehall Road Regional Park, so.
Interesting. I did not receive a single communication about that.
I also received many emails about Whitehall Regional Park.
Interesting. I would love to have the data of number of emails per supervisor because I'm a nerd that way.
Well, I didn't have emails, but I did have people reach out to me or stop me when I was walking Lily, and we had some discussions.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing all that. I wanted to just mention that I did forget to capture something in our previous agenda item, and this is not something that I'm telling you this for transparency and my intention of what to do with it. That you can then hold me accountable later because I really don't want to open up the agenda item again. But I forgot, because it was on a separate piece of paper, to mention that I wanted to capture two of the items that one of our residents brought forward, and one was the recommendation for owner's representative, and the other was what is being done to generate additional funds. So I do plan on passing them forward with a notation that I failed to capture them in my recap in our agenda item, but that they were posed. And again, I will of course include any prioritization suggestions that were made, just for transparency. All right, if no other communications, we'll move on to calendar items. Nothing in particular to highlight. Anybody want to highlight anything there? All right, if nothing else, we'll move on to our adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
So moved. Yeah, we never take a vote on that.
You don't have to.
We
No.
Oh, okay.
Because the chair
according to
can be
Robert's
It's the
assumed.
chair's privilege to adjourn a meeting.
Heck.
Oh, interesting. I always thought it was the chair is assumed as the second, and then you didn't have to do anything, but I guess it's.
Well, I'm
the
glad
chair's
somebody's
privilege.
learning those
Okay.
more refined Robert's rules. Because I'm almost done in this chair. Woohoo! I mean, I've
One
loved it.
more.
I've loved it and also yay.